Story 1. I used to work at a deli and we ran out of a certain kind of ham. A customer, who resembled an angry Ned Flanders, requested the ham. I explained the situation, and he turned an alarming shade of purple. In a shaky voice, he screamed at me, "You have ruined my Labor Day." It was just before Labor Day. Then he stormed off, slamming his shopping cart into several other customers' carts in the process. Chill dude. Story 2. At film school, we had a teacher who was a bit too full of himself. We were going to learn how to analyze and review a movie in one of his classes, and he made a significant mistake by choosing one of his own films for us to work with. That did not go well, as the aforementioned movie was, to put it nicely, quite poor. We completed our assignments and provided well-founded, articulate criticism in our reviews, mentally preparing ourselves for the outcome. We knew this would not go over well. At our next lesson with that teacher, he had a full-blown meltdown in front of the entire class. He began tearing up our reviews and tossing them around the room before storming out while shouting and crying. We heard nothing for the next couple of days while the managing director and the leadership investigated the incident. We were informed that he had been fired on the spot after an altercation with the managing director following our class. It turned out that the teacher had a serious drinking problem, and management was already preparing to take action against him. Our reviews were just the final straw. Story 3. I witnessed a woman storm into a Domino's pizza, push past the others waiting to pick up carry-out orders, and slam a Pizza Hut box down on the counter, shouting that it was the worst pizza she had ever tasted. The employee working looked terrified and said that she would get the manager. The manager, who seemed to be around 20 years old, came out, looked at the box and said, "Yeah, Pizza Hut isn't great. I don't know what you want me to do about it." Chaos ensued. Story 4. This happened to me many years ago. A lady came in very rude from the start. I got rattled and made a mistake or two, making her even more upset. As she left, I said, "Have a nice day." She was furious. She turned around and shouted, "I will not have a nice day. I will not." Then she stormed out the door. The thing is, they were double doors, and we used to keep one locked because the wind would blow it open otherwise. So she slammed into the locked door, grabbed it, and tried to wrench it open. I was genuinely worried she would do damage. She flailed her arms around and yelled profanity before pushing her way through the other door. It was quite a scene. Story 5. I witnessed a man board an airplane drunk and quickly fall asleep. When it was announced that we would be landing soon, with tray tables up, he woke up and asked a flight attendant for coffee. She said, "Sorry, it's too late. We're about to land." And he lost his temper, swearing at her for needing coffee and calling her names for the rest of the flight. When we landed and pulled up to the gate, the captain asked everyone to stay seated, and local police boarded and escorted him away. He seemed very confused about why he was in trouble. Story 6. An older woman, probably in her 70s, was traveling with her even older husband sitting in front of me on a plane. She ordered an alcoholic drink. When the flight attendant brought her drink, she demanded her card back and started ranting and raving, calling the flight attendant a thief. It went on for a while, and at one point she started crying. The flight attendant hadn't even asked for payment yet and definitely hadn't taken her card anywhere. This poor flight attendant must have been the most patient person on earth. She handled it with so much grace. Eventually, the flight attendant found the screaming woman's card on the floor under her seat, where she had apparently dropped it. She did apologize somewhat sheepishly and was very quiet for the rest of the flight. Meanwhile, the husband never acknowledged the situation at all. He just sat there placidly while his wife continued to scream. Story 7. During my training at a tanning salon, we would ask for each person's name and then look them up in our system. One woman came in who had a note in her account indicating that she frequently used stolen credit cards. When asked to leave, she became upset, insisting she would never steal and that we should process her card. However, her card was declined, and we had to threaten to call the police to make her leave. Story 8. I saw a woman remove the hearing aids from her husband's ear while her son, a police officer, watched. She was trying to intimidate me into taking them back, but company policy states that I cannot accept returns. Only a doctor can handle that. Story 9. When I worked in retail, a customer approached my register, and I asked, "Did you find everything okay?" He threw his items on my counter and ignored me. I rang him up, and then he demanded that I call the manager. The manager came over, spoke to him, and he left. The manager then informed me that this customer was offended because I didn't say good morning to him. A few days later, I was called into the office by a different manager because the same customer reported me to corporate for not greeting him. Story 10. I don't personally remember this, but I was supposedly there. I was out with the neighbor's mom and her daughter. The daughter was around 4 and I was about 5. She would often have tantrums, and her mom tried various methods to manage them, but nothing worked. One day at the mall, the child threw a huge tantrum on the ground over something. So the mom, a grown woman, lay down beside her daughter and had a tantrum too, imitating her daughter. She lay on her belly and screamed, "I don't like your tantrums. I want you to stop. You are embarrassing. Why won't you stop?" She kicked her legs and rolled around. The daughter stopped her tantrum, tried to get her mom to stop, and felt embarrassed. She promised to never have a tantrum again and begged her mom to calm down. After a little while, the mom listened to her daughter and stopped. From that day forward, the daughter never had another tantrum. Story 11. I need to share my experience. Someone hit my house with their car while I was out of town. My mother-in-law was there, but she was not much help. I was outside examining the damage, realizing there were no witnesses to the accident, and I jumped up and down in anger, shaking my fists. My wife called me out on it right away. "Did you just jump like a child?" I admitted I did, regretted it immediately, and went inside. Story 12. People will attempt to return items that are clearly abused or heavily used, such as worn-out shoes, stained clothes, or broken electronics that appear to have endured significant damage. They often act shocked and angry when the store refuses to accept the return. Story 13. Besides patients throwing temper tantrums, I have witnessed a few notable incidents related to travel. 1. When I was younger, my family was on a cruise. We were in port, but the weather was slightly stormy and unfortunately was going to get worse, leading to the cancellation of many excursions. This made sense to everyone except for one passenger, a grown woman who yelled on the beach for about half an hour about how wrong it was for the cruise to dock in a port on a stormy day, insisting they should have waited off the coast until it was sunny. She screamed, "Sunny," repeatedly. Someone finally shouted, "Hey, lady, do you want to get struck by lightning or what?" To which she responded, "I don't care." Eventually, she lost her voice and wandered away. A couple was sitting at their gate and somehow missed their plane being called to board from about 20 feet away. It was a crowded airport before a holiday, so it wasn't immediately clear who was on which flight. If it had been less crowded, an agent might have noticed them and called them to board. Eventually, one of them stood up to check the boarding status. At that point, the plane had already pulled away from the jet bridge. They began yelling until the gate agent intervened, stating that nearly 200 other passengers had managed to board and the discussion was over. That settled the matter. Many years ago, before the advent of camera phones, I witnessed a man slap a flight attendant because she asked him to return to his assigned seat, which he had acquired by waiting on standby. He claimed he didn't like the seat and wanted to change it on a fully booked flight. Eventually, he hit her, prompting several passengers to stand up in her defense. Mr. Tough Guy immediately raised his hands and attempted to say he would return to his seat, eventually allowing himself to be handcuffed with zip ties. He sat on the floor near the drink cart for the remainder of the flight, except during landing when he was buckled into a seat in the front row, allowing another passenger to take his original seat. Although I do not recall all the details, it was clear that the flight attendants were communicating with the pilots, and they decided the situation was under control. As long as he did not act up again, we could continue on our route. We landed shortly afterward, and the seatbelt sign turned off. On cue and without warning, as soon as the sign was off, marshals burst onto the plane yelling, "Everyone sit down!" We complied immediately. They quickly removed the man from the plane and had him face down on the tarmac in real handcuffs as we deplaned. He shot us the most disdainful looks, as if he believed he was in this predicament solely because we had turned him in to the marshals. Story 14. At an upscale retirement community, I saw an older woman throw a tantrum because we allowed a few laborers to eat breakfast for free. These workers do great work. They are dependable, reliable, respectful, and appreciated by everyone except one elderly lady screaming in the lobby about how they shouldn't be getting a free meal. Story 15. A man was fired from his previous job for repeatedly leaving the doors unlocked after his evening shift. We worked in the technology sector, which had expensive equipment. I discovered he was fired when his foot unexpectedly went through the door of the boss's office. When they opened the door, he was writhing on the floor, red in the face, crying and screaming. Story 16. I recently had a man in his late 30s throw a tantrum because, at the pool where I work, we wouldn't let him take his toy balls into the water. They were small, soft balls that soak up water. After some unfortunate incidents in the past with children throwing them hard and hitting others in the face, we banned them. My colleague calmly explained that he couldn't use those balls, but that he could get a large, air-filled beach ball from us. He refused to acknowledge what we told him and continued walking into the pool with his children. My colleague kept insisting that he couldn't do that. The man completely rejected what my colleague said and became loud. Things escalated a bit. Then he threw one of those balls against the wall in anger, nearly hitting me in the face. I barely managed to dodge it, and he still didn't understand why they weren't allowed. My colleague was close to calling the police for what could have easily been seen as attempted assault. Eventually, we managed to exchange his two balls for the safe ones we had. However, 30 minutes later, he returned, furious. I calmly tried to explain the reason for the rule, but he interrupted me, demanding his money back. At this point, he had been in the pool for 1 hour. He then stormed off, pulling his children, who were 8 and 10 years old, from the pool. Children who clearly did not want to leave. I even told them I was sorry. In the end, the man did not get his money back, and I made sure of it. You can't swim for an hour for free just because you don't want to follow the rules. It is hard to imagine an adult, a father, throwing such a tantrum over some children's toys he wasn't allowed to use. Story 17. I was at a car rental at the airport. They didn't have the exact vehicle this woman wanted, so she sat on a bench and wept dramatically while her husband and son watched awkwardly. I couldn't help but think she probably reacts this way to any small setback. Vacationing with her must be challenging. Story 18. I was in a Dairy Queen when a man burst through the doors holding a spoon, having just ordered through the drive-thru. He exclaimed, "Do you have any real spoons?" Dairy Queen offers 2 different sizes of spoons depending on the size of your blizzard. The employee at the counter responded, "Sorry, sir. We ran out of the tall ones." The man replied, "You should inform people of that before they order." Story 19. In high school, I worked for a painting crew that painted houses in our small town. During my 2nd or 3rd summer, we had pretty much the same crew, and our boss was a teacher who had done this for years. In early June, a college-age guy joined us who I sort of knew. It was his first job, and he had never been told no. We usually listened to the radio that everyone generally liked, but he kept changing it to a station nobody enjoyed. He was a poor worker, didn't understand that this was actual work, and being the new guy didn't earn him any favor. In fact, it was quite the opposite. One person on the job site told him not to touch his radio again, and he looked shocked that he wasn't getting his way. He literally started stomping around, and I'm pretty sure he was about to cry a little. He just walked home, and I've heard, even years later, that he struggles with mental health issues and basically never matured. He's over 40 now. Later, I found out he completely wasted his time and money that first year of college, and his parents were going through a divorce. They were well off and had spoiled him for years. Reality can be harsh sometimes, and he couldn't cope. I felt somewhat bad for him, but I took it as a warning not to slack off. Story 20. A woman forgot her discount voucher and decided the best way to address this issue was to say, "I've forgotten my voucher. What are you going to do about it?" Although the voucher clearly stated it needed to be presented at purchase, I do have some discretion in what to do if someone forgets it. For my regular customers who were polite, I would apply it anyway. For her, I made what I thought was a reasonable alternative offer. She pays full price now, but if she brings the voucher within the next 2 weeks, I will refund the difference and make a note of that on her receipt so if she returns when I'm not in, she will still receive it. She did not agree that was a reasonable alternative offer. She angrily walked to the door and said, "I'll leave if you don't honor it in full." I was done with her at that point, so I just said okay and watched her try to storm out. Or at least she intended to storm out. But what she actually did was forget the door opens inwards, not outwards, and slammed into it instead. That was all for a voucher that would have saved her about £2.50 on a £50 order. Story 21. I told my neighbor to stop throwing dirty water from her balcony. She became angry and started throwing it at me. We have a 30-year age gap. Story 22. I had an aunt who owned a nail shop in the early 2000s. I was in her shop, very pregnant, getting my feet done. One of my cousins brought me a plate from the back room, and we were not speaking English to each other. I had a small health scare that week and was updating him. He kissed my forehead and left. You'd think the forehead kiss might have given this woman a clue. The woman sitting a chair down from me started talking loudly about how she thought it was strange that some people received special treatment, while staring at me. I asked her if she had an issue, and she began yelling at me for being entitled. She claimed I didn't deserve special treatment for being pregnant and accused me of being incredibly rude for asking for food I clearly didn't pay for. My aunt was in the back office, and there were maybe 2 other customers getting services. The girl doing the other woman's feet got scared, started crying, and ran off to inform my aunt. My aunt came out while this lady was yelling and ranting about being ripped off and a series of outrageous claims. When she noticed my aunt, she began demanding an explanation, money, and free services. She even demanded a purse. She had seen me there before and was telling my aunt that I never paid, stole, and was obviously taking advantage of them. I do look different from my relatives, but that was not her business. My aunt looked at the woman, pointed at me, and said, "That's my niece. Get out." The police were called. The woman knocked over a display and was throwing nail polish out the door when the police arrived. Admittedly, I made things worse by laughing when she almost fell a couple of times during her tantrum. I paid the price for that and nearly lost control. My aunt banned her for life and had her arrested a couple of months later when she attempted to get her nails done as if nothing happened. My aunt never forgot the face of someone she banned, and she did not tolerate people getting loud in her shop. She was infamous for saying the same thing to anyone she banned. "No, that's enough. Get out. Never come back." This made me smile. My aunt was great, and I miss her. Story 23. It is debatable whether one could call her an adult, but I vividly remember my older sister losing her temper at me when she was 18 and I was 15. At that age, she rarely spent time at home, usually sleeping at friends' houses. It is important to note that the door was always open, and she was never kicked out. She simply did whatever she wanted. As a result, she missed dinner the night before the incident, which featured bratwursts. She had been hanging out with a friend for several days, so none of us had seen her until that afternoon when she came home. As a hungry teenager, I ate the 2 leftover bratwursts from the package in the middle of the night. Sue me. She returned home around 4 in the afternoon, opened the fridge, and immediately accused me of eating her leftovers. Again, please note that not a single family member had seen her in literal days, so I had no clue what she was talking about. I apologized, returned to what I was doing, and thought that was the end of it. What followed was one of the most bizarre instances of human behavior I have ever witnessed. She proceeded to lose it, but not in a typical way. I mean an actual, physical toddler tantrum, wailing on the floor, stomping her foot, screaming at me that it was my fault, demanding I make her something to eat, pounding her fists on the table, shaking her head, and screeching. It was truly one of the strangest displays I've ever seen. It was as if she regressed back to a 3-year-old. I still remember sitting at the table, completely baffled by this behavior. After a minute or 2 of staring at her, I realized she just wanted attention, so I ignored her. That triggered a level of physical aggression I hadn't seen in years. I should mention that my sister had a history of abusing me throughout my childhood and adolescence. For anyone ready to argue about sibling rivalries or tell me I'm being dramatic, believe me, I've heard it all and I stand by what I said. I even got my parents to admit it, although they were unwilling to take action. Physical violence, verbal abuse, and severe attention-seeking behavior were nothing new from her. Typically, she managed to control herself better. Her behavior was usually more subtle than a full-blown tantrum. I'm still perplexed by her display to this day. Never before or since did she regress to such an extent. While she has always been emotionally stunted and immature, she is very skilled at hiding it. After realizing she wouldn't get a reaction out of me, she actually screamed that she was telling our mother. In a normal household, this would have had no effect because what normal parent would take her side? But my parents are enablers, so I felt a bit worried. It took all my strength not to burst out laughing when I heard her reprimand my sister for speaking to me that way. I can probably count on my hands the number of times they've confronted her about her behavior, making it perversely satisfying when it happens. She went too far this time. I think that was one of the few times I got a true glimpse into her mental state. She has been in a state of arrested development ever since I came home from the hospital and no longer had our parents entirely to herself. It's one of my favorite memories for many reasons, not just because my parents defended me for once, but also because it was one of the first times I realized how little power she had over me anymore. No matter how much she screamed and wailed, she couldn't provoke a reaction from me. She couldn't get anything she wanted from me anymore. After that, she sort of ghosted in and out of my life until she moved out. That wasn't the end of her abuse, but it marked the real beginning of her decline. Additionally, what a timeless piece of blackmail material. No matter how composed she presents herself, I know who she is. Deep down, she's still a spoiled brat, and I have proof. She can never take that away from me. Story 24. Miami Airport in December. A large man in his 50s was screaming and then fell to the ground, shrieking like a toddler after missing his flight, as they locked the doors 15 minutes before departure. He threw himself to the ground, sobbing loudly, then screamed in anger and shrieked again. This continued for about 20 minutes before the airline staff quietly warned him that if he did not calm down, he would be taken away in handcuffs. Story 25. There was a limited quantity of cases of water that each customer could buy from our store after my state was hit by several natural disasters to prevent resellers. Despite being told no by every sign and customer service associate, she decided to load a cart and proceed to the register. Unfortunately, this woman lost control and soiled her pants at the cash register after not getting her way, leaving with the amount of water she was entitled to. Additionally, she was a repeat customer. I would never show my face in public after that. Story 26. An older man at my workplace, which is a gym, couldn't accept that I told him using his phone with the volume on full blast was inconsiderate to others and that he needed to use earphones. He was so offended that he filed a complaint with my manager and human resources and even wrote a 4-paragraph review on the gym's page asking for my resignation. Story 27. Then my husband, now my ex for many years, always had a terrible temper and would become irrationally angry over seemingly minor things. I worked full-time, we had children, his elderly mother lived with us, and I was active in our church at his request. When I didn't have time to clean the house to his specifications, instead of helping, he dumped a trash can on the living room floor for me to clean up. When I planted a flower bed but didn't have time to weed it as he wanted, instead of helping, he ripped all the plants up and left it for me to clean. That sort of thing. He was emotionally and verbally abusive for most of our marriage. When he turned 30, we had been together for about 4 years. He made it very clear he was not happy about turning 30. He didn't want me to wish him a happy birthday, didn't want a cake, didn't want presents, no party, nothing. He didn't even want me to acknowledge the day. I thought this was an odd thing to be upset about, but knowing his temper, I accepted it and figured it was best to do what he asked. So the morning of his birthday, I kissed him goodbye and went to work, without saying a word about his birthday. When I came home, I found him sitting on the couch, arms crossed and glaring at me. I asked if something was wrong. His response was, "It's my birthday. You didn't even wish me a happy birthday this morning. No cake, no presents, nothing. Real nice." Then he proceeded to rant and rave at me for 30 minutes about how inconsiderate I was and how I must not care about him, etc. His temper was escalating by the minute, but so was mine. Finally, I lost it and said, "Why don't you just knock me through a wall?" He looked shocked and said, "But I don't want to hit you." I responded, "Then shut up and stop yelling at me. I can't help that you're turning 30. Story 28. On the third Sunday of every October, the cities of Detroit and Windsor host the Detroit Free Press Marathon, an event that has been held annually for almost 50 years. The city of Detroit effectively shuts down several major thoroughfares for the marathon. Signs are posted on every block for a good week leading up to it, and no cars are permitted to park on the streets that Saturday and Sunday. About 10 years ago, the house I rented was on one of these main roads. I had to work that morning as a waitress at a diner, so I decided to enjoy my morning coffee on my porch and wave at some of the participants as they ran by. My house was about the fifth down from an intersection with a traffic light, where orange cones and pylons were blocking traffic. I knew for a fact that the cross street was also closed between the roads that ran parallel to mine. There were Detroit police officers with their clearly marked vehicles at the intersection, waving as people ran by. Suddenly, a silver SUV slowly inched into the intersection, attempting to navigate around everything blocking the road and make a left directly towards the approaching runners. The officers quickly intervened before the driver had even reached the light, directing the runners along the sidewalk and signaling her to keep going straight. The woman seemed to think that the police were pausing the marathon, which the city had organized for months, so she could simply cross the road. She waved at them and tried to speed through. The officers did not appreciate this. What followed was one of the most epic meltdowns I have ever witnessed. They motioned for her to pull to the side, had a brief conversation with her through the window, and chaos ensued. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the woman began screaming about how she didn't have time for this, claiming they had made a mistake and she was just leaving her friend's house. The officers pulled her from the vehicle after she refused to exit willingly, sat her down on the sidewalk, and continued trying to reason with her as she sobbed uncontrollably. They seemed mostly focused on calming her down and figuring out what to do next, but she wouldn't stop threatening them between sobs, insisting they had no right to do this to a woman and that they couldn't possibly arrest her because she was a yoga instructor. I heard that part quite clearly. Eventually, they had enough, cuffed her hands behind her back, and began the process of forcing her to her feet and loading her into the back of the patrol car. People were still running by while this was happening. As they tried to lower her head into the car, she screamed at the runners to help her, saying she didn't know these officers and they couldn't do this to her. They closed the door on her while she was still wailing, and the sudden muffling of her sobs is still one of the funniest things I have ever witnessed. I'll never know what happened to her or if her yoga class was kept waiting, but pay attention, entitled individual. In summary, a woman tried to drive through the Detroit Marathon while it was in progress, attempted the "oops, I'm just a lady" approach with the officers, and when that didn't work, she pulled the "don't you know who I am" card. When they remained indifferent, she tried to frame it as her being abducted and expected the runners she nearly endangered to come to her rescue. Story 29. I briefly took a gig as a drummer for a one-hit wonder 1980s rock band. It was just the original singer and a group of hired musicians. We practiced a few times and it was fine. There are stories about this singer's legendary tantrums related to substance abuse in the 1980s. Surely he's past that by now, right? This was around 2013 or 2014. We got a few songs into the first show when the singer's microphone started cutting out. Probably a bad cable. We switched it out quickly and moved on. Normal musicians would try to handle this without the crowd noticing. Not this guy. He ordered us to stop mid-song. I swear he started literally jumping up and down, screaming about how this was unacceptable, and demanding to know who he was. He screamed at the sound technician at the top of his lungs into a microphone that didn't work. The rest of us on stage just looked at each other, baffled. They switched his cable, the microphone worked, and we played one more song, but I don't think we even performed the one big hit everyone was there to hear. Oh my God, that was one of the top 3 most embarrassing moments of my life. He probably only melted down for about 15 seconds, but it felt like an hour. We played 2 more shows with him. Neither was as bad as the first one, but it was still unremarkable. When we told him we were done, he lost his temper again. He actually said to me on a phone call, "I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Who says that? He also threatened to harm one of the guitar players around the same time. I can't reveal the band's name because this person is unstable enough that he likely searches for himself online daily and will start the same old drama if he sees someone calling him out. I don't want to deal with that. Story 30. I was once blocked and verbally attacked on social media by a professional hockey player who mistook me for his ex-wife's friend. Never mind that one. I'm a nobody too. I don't even live in the same country, and 3. I didn't know he was married. He never admitted to his mistake, and his verbal attack led his fans to come after me as well. Today, he has been exposed as one of those conspiracy theorists promoting misinformation and false news. So I'm not losing sleep over what happened. He was always destined to behave erratically. It is still quite an adult tantrum though. Even if I were his ex-wife's friend, why does it even matter? Is she not allowed to have friends? Is he not allowed to interact with her friends? I just don't get it. I can only assume that he could be one of those controlling husband types. Story 31. Back in the early 2000s, I worked in a grocery store, and a woman tried to pass an obvious counterfeit bill. I don't remember the amount, but she was sent to customer service because the cashier was a teenager and didn't know how to confront someone over fake cash. The woman proceeded to lose her temper, throwing a carton of eggs and breaking open a carton of orange juice. It escalated to the point where the police were called. Tops Friendly Markets, I never missed you. Story 32. I was at the grocery store when a man took the last 2% milk and had a full-blown tantrum. Someone else came in and found more behind the crate, and he laughed it off, but most were unimpressed. Story 33. My boss was being fired, so he referred to his superior as Asian Hitler, and then shook everyone's hand. The thing is, his boss was very understanding, while my boss, when called an unkind name because he was indeed unkind, would simply say thank you. Story 34. One of my former managers at my previous job refused to talk to me for over 2 months because I didn't immediately drop everything to hand her lids for our side dish containers during a busy lunch rush. I overheard her complaining to one of the other managers, who is also her son, about how I never helped her. Thankfully, he defended me and pointed out that I always assisted her with stocking and unloading the truck. Story 35. An adult man in eyeliner became very angry with another man because he didn't say thank you clearly enough and was wearing a sweater. Story 36. My previous manager became so upset that his voice resembled Mickey Mouse. He micromanaged himself into a corner and could not get out. He blamed everyone for his irritation. He failed to realize that promoting the best employees to dictators instead of actual leaders was causing widespread insubordination. Story 37. During the height of COVID-19, a man at Chipotle was instructed to wear a mask. He left, but not before hitting the wall and breaking the glass doors. Story 38. I worked at a tech store where a man threw a smoothie across the store when my manager asked him to stop cursing, as there were children nearby. I believe he also wanted his phone replaced. Story 39. I compete at dog agility shows. There is a competitor I have faced for years. He takes great pride in his dogs and his skills. He has won national championships with several dogs and recently acquired a very nice puppy that is already performing well. He is friendly enough to talk to, but generally keeps to himself. I must admit that I used to be jealous of him. During a recent competition, he made a mistake on the course, as we all do. Instead of continuing, he stood still and shouted, "This is not fair." He expressed his frustration with the judge for what he perceived as a flawed course, berated his dog for the error, and voiced his complaints to the crowd about the unfairness of the situation. He picked up his dog, stormed off, and left the venue. It wasn't even an important show, just a local event. We were all stunned into silence. He had never displayed any signs of anger before. I had witnessed him make numerous mistakes, yet he had never reacted that way. Naturally, he was reprimanded by the organizing body for his comments to both the judge and his dog, and he subsequently continued to voice his complaints about the perceived injustice. Story 40. A guest came to our resort and reserved a specific room. For some reason, the room was no longer available. I believe it was our mistake, given how far management was accommodating him. He was at the desk complaining loudly. They offered him a larger suite, which, in my opinion, is the best room we have, located less than 60 yards from the other room at no additional cost. Same view. That wasn't good enough. He drove 4 hours to get here. They offered him the larger suite and to cover his entire 7-day stay, meaning his stay would be completely free unless he severely damaged the room or something similar. Still not satisfactory. They had ruined his vacation. He continued to complain endlessly. Finally, management stated that was the best they could do and offered to cancel his reservation, refund all his money, and let him leave. He accepted that offer. I was the fortunate person assigned to bring his family's bags down to the car. Throughout this time, he kept lamenting how he had to drive 4 hours back and how his vacation was ruined. I thought to myself, you did this to yourself. You could have stayed here for free, and I'm supposed to feel sorry for you. He continued to go on and on. Finally, I said, "Oh no," very sarcastically. He looked at me and I looked at him. Neither of us said anything else. I loaded all his belongings in the car and left. Not deep. Story 41. I once had a local preacher scream and curse at me until he was red in the face, then spit on me. He was in the McDonald's drive-thru, and his card wasn't working. At another McDonald's where I worked, my friend had a Golden Compass Happy Meal toy thrown at his head because the parent claimed Golden Compass was the devil. Southern Alabama was a truly wild place. Story 42. In my first job at a combined electronics and furniture store in the early 1980s, a woman came in and loudly complained about a painting hanging behind the register. It depicted a young naked woman on a chaise, painted in an extremely modest pose that revealed very little. The woman argued that it was a painting of a prepubescent girl and insisted that it should be removed. I called the manager, who went to his office, and 10 minutes later, she emerged and purchased the painting. He told her there was nothing wrong with it and that the only way he would remove it was if someone bought it. To this day, I have never seen a better sales job. Story 43. A few weeks ago at the dispensary, a man told the bud tender that he was very eco-conscious and didn't want his cannabis products in a bag. She politely explained that she couldn't let him carry out the product due to the law, but assured him that the bags were made of paper and recyclable. He flushed red in the face and began arguing with her about carbon footprints. She again politely clarified that it wasn't a choice, but a requirement of the law that she had to follow. The rest of us in the small store watched as the man turned an alarming shade of red over a paper bag. He snatched the bag from her, called her an idiot, and left. She wished him to have the day he deserved. We all started laughing and joking about the situation, as is common among cannabis enthusiasts. He immediately stormed back through the door and slammed the empty paper bag down on the counter, which only made us laugh harder. At least we were having a good time. Story 44. I work in retail. A policewoman came in wanting to return a pair of $19 shoes. I processed the return, but our system did not print a physical receipt. It was emailed instead. She became upset and demanded to know my name. I refused because it was unnecessary. Story 45. I worked at a home decor and antique store. A woman came in with her husband, who pouted and stomped his feet while whining that he wanted to leave. Story 46. The individuals on their podcasts are expressing frustration about women over the age of 25, becoming very animated in their discussions. Story 47. I worked at a bakery, and a grown man threw a tantrum because his daughter's birthday cake was the wrong shade of pink. He made the 17-year-old counter girl cry. Story 48. I used to work as an usher at the symphony, and a man tried to bring a meal into the performance. I told him food was not allowed, so he left and returned with the box hidden under a program. Once again, I informed him that no food was allowed inside. He took the box and threw it at a cart nearby, causing glasses to crash to the floor. There were many incidents like this at the symphony. When you gather a group of privileged people, Some tend to act like spoiled brats. Story 49. I was in a Penzi Spices store during one of their free jar promotions. The store was very busy, with long lines at both registers. Two women were assisting customers on either side of the counter, moving people along and seeming to have fun. Suddenly, they ran out of the free jars, and this is what I saw. An older woman, eyes tightly closed, face red with anger, hands clenched, began screaming, "But I wanted it!" at the top of her lungs, stomping her feet like a toddler. She was fully screaming like a child in a cereal aisle. The mood dramatically shifted to chaos as other women joined in, demanding something immediately. It was overwhelming to witness, as I saw other women puffing themselves up to confront the staff, who frantically offered free jars of cinnamon as a temporary solution and rain checks. Unfortunately, that wasn't good enough, and soon several other women began screaming. I felt so stressed out by the group mentality directed toward those poor employees. Story 50. When I worked at a conservative Christian university Starbucks, an elderly conservative Christian woman's total for her Frappuccino and breath mints came to $6.66. She started yelling loudly, "Change it! Change the number! Gir Jesus!" I told her I couldn't. She threw more mints at me to ring up, which I did. She called me evil and stormed off, mumbling about Jesus and contacting the manager. Story 51. When I refused to refill a prescription for alprazolam for a new patient who had been off of it for months, she began screaming and crying in the office. Story 52. When I worked at a small airport, a man under the influence of an unknown substance, who smelled like cat urine, entered the lobby. He informed the other airline staff that Donald Trump had a ticket for him and that he needed to go to Russia to meet Vladimir Putin. They kindly provided him with directions to the private airport and mentioned that if a plane was sent for him, it would be over there. He insisted that it was on their airline. Ultimately, he could not accept that they did not have any flights to Russia and had to be subdued with a taser after making threats to the officer, claiming he would kill him. Story 53. The one day I didn't wear my wedding ring at my retail job. A man asked me out and suddenly lost his composure when I told him I was married. The interaction was pleasant until he yelled at me that he had checked for a ring first. Turning red in the face and spitting in anger, my manager heard him from the back of the warehouse and came running to eject the man from the premises. As a woman, I've had many men react negatively toward me, but I've never encountered one who insisted that unless I was openly claimed by a man, I was expected to say yes to the first man who asked. What I want doesn't matter. I'm seen as up for grabs. Story 54. Me when my plane in Lima got delayed for no reason, which made me miss my connecting flight in Miami by 15 minutes. There were no other flights to New Orleans for the entire day, and we arrived at 6 in the morning. They wouldn't put us up in a hotel because the delay wasn't weather-related, and the food voucher they gave us in Lima was only good for Burger King, but nobody told us that until we had already ordered food at another place. They also set up another security check at the gate in Lima while we boarded and took all the drinks and anything over 3 ounces we had purchased in the terminal, so we only had the small airline cups and snacks for the entire 7-hour flight. I still don't know what caused the delay in Lima. I was crying so hard when I got to customs in Miami that a group of Homeland Security agents approached me and asked if I was a victim of human trafficking, and I screamed, "I'm a victim of American Airlines." At that point, both my husband and I agreed that the best course of action was to give me a Xanax and store me under a seat in the terminal until he figured things out. Story 55. A man I saw at a pizza restaurant, one of those build-your-own places, was turning red from yelling because they ran out of mushrooms. Story 56. I was working in a jewelry store when a woman came in to have a gold band resized. I accepted the job and called her a few days later to say the ring was ready. She was pleasant when she came to pick it up. The next day, she returned with her husband, who was furious. He shouted that we had made the ring too small, accused us of stealing his money, and called us crooks. His wife stood next to him, looking like she was about to cry. All I could think was that I had been given a size number, and that was the size the ring was adjusted to. My boss saw it differently and decided to fire me. To this day, I am convinced that if I had turned the job away, I would have been fired for that too. Some situations are impossible to win. Story 57. I saw a president enact tariffs against the advice of every expert simply because he does not like being told what to do. Story 58. I was on my period and had just dropped my kids off at their dad's, who can be quite difficult. I love my kids so much that I usually hold in my feelings. As I was leaving at 40 miles per hour, someone had left their trash can on my side of the road, while 3 people were walking on the other side. I would have had to come to a complete stop, wait for them to finish walking, and then drive into the opposite lane to get around the trash can. What did I do? I ran that trash can over with my car, bumps and all. I had never done anything like that in my life, but it felt so good. Story 59. Many memories come to mind. One time at school camp, we had a leader who enjoyed playing practical jokes on us. Nothing too nasty, just things like hiding our shoes. However, we thought it would be funny to get revenge on him and had a peanut butter fight. As kids, around 9 or 10 years old, we thought it was hilarious. He had a complete meltdown, started screaming at us with words I won't repeat, sobbed, and then stormed off. We all just sat there stunned. Full credit to him, though. He brought us together as a group and explained that he had grown up in the system and that this type of group bullying was triggering for him. He apologized sincerely, and it's always stuck with me. Another memory is from when I was about 19 and had a boyfriend. I tried several times to break up with him, but he just wouldn't take no for an answer. He would scream, cry, and even lie on the road, yelling at cars to run over him. He showed up at my work and at my house, both times I hid, and would call, demanding I give him back all my birthday gifts so he could re-gift them to imaginary new girlfriends. His mother even encouraged him to fight for what was rightfully his. This went on for a few months, and it became quite nasty. A partner I once had said I couldn't go catch up with an old friend. I couldn't believe he was telling me what to do, so I went anyway. He punched a hole in the wall, cut up photos of us, and threw out my clothes. That was the beginning of the end. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.